And as you can see, it's still a little bit frozen, which is why it's all stuck together. But if it was thawed out, it's kind of in strips and chunks. So the first thing you need to render lard at home is pig fat. Now, it does matter what type of pig fat you find. I recommend looking for leaf fat or the fat that is around the kidney of the pigs. This is a little more pure tasting, it's going to be whiter, and it won't have quite so much of a bacon taste in your finished products. Now, there's nothing completely wrong with that bacony taste, and it's okay if you're sauteing things for savory meals, but if you're planning on using your lard to make pie crusts and pastries, you may not want that extra flavor. So if you can, specify to your butcher or your meat man that you would like the leaf fat to make leaf lard. Now, when we butcher our pigs, whether we do it ourselves or we send them to the butcher, I always request for them to save me that fat. We actually haven't had pigs for a year or two, so I'm a little bit low in the fat department. So I found a local farmer who raises high quality pigs, and he sold me this leaf fat. And as you can see, it's still a little bit frozen, which is why it's all stuck together. But if it was thawed out, it's kind of in strips and chunks. Now, it is a good idea to work with this when it is cold or just a little bit frozen like I have here today. It's going to keep it from getting as greasy on your hands, and it's just easier to chop and handle overall. So the first step with getting your pork fat ready to render is to trim off any meat bits or really gristly bits that might be attached, and then chop it into small pieces. Now, it's really important to get the pieces as small as possible without driving yourself crazy, of course, because we want them to melt down quickly and evenly. So you can either use a knife for this, or if the fat is cold and a little bit frozen, you can chop it into medium-sized chunks and then put it in your food processor and give it a few whirls there. Now, the danger of doing this in your food processor is that if you overprocess it, it will turn into a bit of a pork fat puree, which is going to make the rendering process a little more sticky, and you just really don't want that. I'm just going to use a knife today to get this done and trim and chop as we go. I like to trim off any little bits of meat or gristle, but if you can't get it all, it's okay, because this is what the rendering process will do for us. Now, once you have the pork fat chopped into small little bits, go ahead and put it in a stock pot. Now, to this stock pot, we're going to add about 1/4 cup of water and then turn the burner on the lowest setting possible. You could also do this in a crock pot, but I've actually found that my crock pot's low setting is a little bit too warm for rendering fats. Now, if you have too high of a temperature when you are rendering lard or tallow, the danger is it can scorch the fat a little bit and make it have a stronger flavor. I have done this before, and it wasn't the end of the world. I was able to salvage the lard and still use it. It just wasn't as pure white, and it didn't have quite the pure flavor that I would want for a pie crust or something along those lines. But once you get it in the pot, all you have to do is keep it on low, stir it on occasion to make sure nothing is sticking or burning, and then let it do its thing for a couple hours until you have completely melted fat, a few impurities floating on top, and everything is completely melted. Once the lard has rendered sufficiently, pull it off the burner and strain it to remove any of the things that are floating on top. You don't want that in your finished fat. Now, to store lard, I like to pour it into mason jars and then keep it either in my refrigerator or in my very cool basement during the winter. You can also freeze the lard if you want, but keep in mind it doesn't have to be stored in the fridge or the freezer as long as you have a cool room to keep it. It should last for many, many months that way. To use the lard, you just scoop it out of the jar, I like to use it for sauteing onions and garlic when I'm creating soup or stews or skillet meals. It's amazing for making homemade French fries, so is beef tallow, by the way. And of course, the famous lard pie crusts. If you only have access to beef fat, well, you render tallow this exact same way. Trim it, dice it, render it, and the method is exactly the same. Your beef tallow might be a little bit more yellow depending on the breed of cow that you obtained the fat from, but you would just ask for the same sort of fat, leaf fat or kidney fat. You'll get a lot more of it from a beef, and it's excellent for sauteing or making homemade French fries. Oh my goodness. And that's it, guys. With just a little bit of effort, you can have home rendered lard that would make your great grandma proud. If you like old-fashioned recipes like this one, then you'll want to grab a copy of the brand new Prairie Homestead Cookbook. It contains over 100 of our family's favorite from-scratch recipes, and you can get over $100 worth of bonuses when you go to homesteadcookbook.com.